where there are ongoing attacks. A remarkable and potentially pivotal moment here in Ukraine as day 21 of the war begins. Russian forces, though, apparently stalled outside Kyiv, failing to meet objectives, according to a senior U.S. defense official, are nonetheless within artillery range and have been hitting the city and suburbs relentlessly, including tonight. And I should point out there's a 35-hour curfew there because of fear of what may lay ahead in the next 24 to 48 hours. Earlier today, there were missiles that struck 4 buildings in the space of a single hour. However, to this point, they've been unable to encircle Kyiv. In cities they have encircled, the devastation continues. There's new video from Mariupol in the south, which was hit upwards of 100 times yesterday, according to the mayor. As another local lawmaker put it today, the situation there is catastrophic.
It's not about military men. It's about terrorists, because they understand that they can get Mariupol with their troops. So they use heavy artillery and use explosive bombing to totally destroy the city. On last 5 days, they don't stop bombing in a minute. They bombing and shelling all the time, and our city is totally destroyed. Totally.
Some 20,000 people were said to have made it out of Mariupol today and through a sort of unofficial humanitarian corridor. The people of Kyiv have yet to face exactly what the people of Mariupol and Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, and other besieged cities are going through right now, but what they are experiencing is horrific. Life in the capital is incredibly dangerous and getting more so by the minute. CNN's Sam Kiley is there for us tonight, where air raid sirens have been going off. Sam, talk about what you are hearing tonight.
Well, tonight, Anderson, over the last few hours, sporadically but very heavily, there's been substantial explosions out to the west of the city. Now, this has been an area where the Russians have concentrated a lot of their firepower. Even this morning, you mentioned there 4 people killed in an apartment building that was in the west of the city that was struck with some kind of missile. There is, though, a probability, I think, that it is the Ukrainians that are getting on the front foot now. Reportedly from some government sources speaking on social media, this is looking like a Ukrainian counterattack potentially against Russian forces. We'll get more clarity on that in daylight. And this is, in all probability, if it is a counterattack, it's an attempt to focus Russian military efforts on trying to defend themselves rather than on what had been anticipated, which was the Russians reorganizing and then trying themselves to penetrate deeper into the city, not just in the west, Anderson, but also in the east, and ultimately try to cut Kyiv off in the way that we've seen in Mariupol and that we've seen them trying to do in Kharkiv. Kharkiv, of course, being another city that has been devastated by very heavy attacks indeed, particularly in the last 24 hours against civilian targets. But here in Kyiv, the combat continues as diplomacy also gets underway. There are some glimmers of hopes in terms of talks with Russians, at least some optimism coming from the Ukrainian side. Anderson?
I want to ask you about that in a second. Can you just talk a little bit about this 35-hour curfew? Early on in the war, there was a very long curfew. I think it was a 24-hour one, if I'm not mistaken, perhaps longer in Kyiv. This is the first time this has happened again since that time. Is that because we talked to a member of parliament who says that she's very worried about what may happen in the next day or two. Are they expecting something, and that's why they have this curfew?
It's been very difficult to get clarity, as you might imagine, from defense sources here, but there are 2 kind of analyses. The first is, which seems to be underway, is that the Ukrainians are going on their own counterattack, but that doesn't mean that they didn't have intelligence about a potential Russian attack. And that's certainly the sort of intelligence that they're being fed externally, certainly from the United Kingdom and the United States. And remember, they have a very substantial help that they can provide to the Ukrainians in terms of signal intelligence intercepts. The Ukrainians have got their own too, and indeed the movement of Russian troops. You recall that very large convoy that was appeared to be stuck north of Kiev. That's now been dispersed, and there's concern that it has been partly dispersed in order to be part of this regrouping operation to come in from the east, and that indeed was what your guest earlier on was referring to, Anderson.
Sam Kiley, I appreciate it in Ukraine. Thank you. In Kyiv, thanks. Perspective now from CNN military analyst, retired Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, also retired Army Brigadier General Peter Zwack. He's a former defense attaché to Russia and currently a global fellow at the Wilson Center's Kennan Institute. General Hertling, this 35-hour curfew, Sam was reporting the fighting he's hearing outside in the suburbs outside Kyiv tonight. What does it tell you that there is this lengthy curfew, which is something of an anomaly? Does it tell you something about what they're concerned about?
It does, Anderson, and Sam's reporting was excellent just now, because this counterattack that the Ukrainian military has been wanting to do for a very long time is happening just at the right moment. You've had multiple analysts on air that have talked about the culminating point of the Russian attack. That means they can't attack any longer. So they are in a bit of confusion right now, trying to reorganize, trying to regain the initiative, and they can't. So the the Ukrainian commanders on the scene is saying, hey, let's take advantage of this confusion. Let's take advantage of this stall. Let's take advantage of the dispersed logistics, and let's attack them. That's what good commanders do. They take advantage of the situation. And I think the Ukrainian announcement of the overnight curfew is part of that, because they want civilians to stay indoors. They want them out of harm's way, because there are more than likely going to be some really tough fighting going on in the suburbs of Kyiv.
Yeah. I should point out we have not been able to independently confirm a Ukrainian counterattack, but obviously that is something that has been talked about. General Zwack, President Zelensky again called for no-fly zones. It's obvious, he wants the maximum he can get, obviously, from the West. We also heard from White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, who said that, quote, adding aircraft to the Ukrainian inventory is not likely to significantly change the effectiveness of the Ukrainian Air Force relative to Russian capabilities. What Zelensky talks about repeatedly is closing the sky, because they really are at the mercy of missiles being fired, rockets hitting buildings. But would closing the sky in the sense of a no-fly zone, so-called, would that actually stop artillery from firing into cities?
Anderson, I believe the decisive fight is what we are watching and hearing about right now. It is I'm trying to visualize thousands and thousands of Ukrainian soldiers, home guard, partisan types with rocket launchers and Kalashnikovs that you reported about, and grenades, just seizing on these Russian forces that are powerful, but they've been helping now for almost over 2 weeks with no respite, no rest. They're powerful, but they've got to be worn out and probably afraid. And I think part of the reordering that we're hearing about, reorganizing, is just trying to reconstitute their forces, because what they've lost momentum. They have lost their morale, and I think they've lost their will to fight. And so they're increasingly trying to dump in artillery and make up. The air power is important, especially for high-level bombers and all that. The Ukrainians have been able to take down the low flyers somewhat, but the fight is on the ground with ground weapons, and it looks like that something really militarily extraordinary is happening. Too early to tell.
General Hertling, the same question to you. I mean, when Zelensky talks about, stopping the bombing of buildings, the shells that are hitting buildings, correct me if I'm wrong, most of those shells are not coming from planes firing them. They're coming from long-range artillery, tanks. You tell me.
Yeah, that's correct, Anderson. I don't know the direct percentage, but I know it's probably greater than 60 or perhaps even 70% are artillery, rocket, and missile fire. So, the aircraft that are actually dropping bombs are certainly a percentage of it, but it's not a significant percentage. And it's those that, Mr. President Zelensky is attempting to close the sky. With a no-fly zone, you wouldn't be able to do that, because the majority of things that are devastating the cities and are causing so much chaos and destruction are these artillery pieces. Russia has always been known for their long-range fires. That is part of their doctrine. So their aircraft have not been able to fly. The Russian aircraft have not been able to fly significantly. They are dropping some bombs. They are dropping some caliber missiles, cruise missiles from high altitude aircraft, as Peter said, but it's not a lot. And they are quickly running out of those kinds of precision weapons, and they're using most of those to go against military targets. What you're seeing in terms of the catastrophe within the Ukrainian cities are primarily being caused by missiles and artillery shells. And it's hard to stop those you can't close the sky to them. I mean, what you have to do is counter battery artillery fire. That requires radar to find out where it's coming from. You need some type of high-level air defense to knock cruise missiles out of the sky. The Ukrainians don't have that. So they don't have the HIMARS artillery, the high-altitude air defense. The Ukrainians have very small numbers of counter battery radars where they can pick up where artillery is being fired from. So unfortunately, those long-range fires are going to continue to rain on the cities. But as Peter said, it's a conventional fight right now. It's defending the cities while they're getting bombed, which is a tough thing to do. Mr. Zelensky wants all of this to stop. He's trying to pull other nations in. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot that other nations can do about this just right now.
General Herling, General Zwack, I appreciate your expertise. Thank you. More now on something you see across the country. Ordinary people taking up arms, mixing Molotov cocktails, training to defend their country by defending their cities and towns and neighborhoods. CNN's Ivan Watson reports.
Dawn breaks over the city of Vinnytsia with an air raid siren. The ground war has yet to reach this city in central Ukraine, but locals aren't taking any chances. This is the entrance to a village on the outskirts of the city, a checkpoint protected by volunteers, an ex-cop, a fireman, and an electrician.
Look at how this village is protecting itself. Homemade tank traps, which the locals call hedgehogs. They've sewn netting and put up sandbags. And around the wall here of this checkpoint, they've got boxes of Molotov cocktails ready. This is all locally made. These are improvised defenses. And this is just one Ukrainian village.
Just down the road, I meet Nina Chitalyuk, who seems like a sweet 71-year-old grandmother.
By the way, Nina says that if she saw Vladimir Putin, she would strangle him with her own hands right now.
I'm ready, she says. If by God the Russians come here, I'll shoot them all and my hands won't even shake. I'll throw grenades at them. There is seething anger here at Moscow's invasion, and at the same time, examples of tremendous generosity. Stacked inside a garage, humanitarian assistance trucked in from Europe. Personal donations of clothes and food for the struggling people of Ukraine. Aid that will then be shipped off to frontline cities.
I want to say thank you for the rest of the world, I want to say that we need help. We need and we will need help.
Is Vinnytsia ready if the Russian military comes to this city?
Yeah. And other cities give us a time. We have 2 weeks to make good defense. Today we ready. But we don't want this.
The war effort extends to Vasily Solsky and his farm, where workers labor listening to news of the war. Vasily donates free food to self-defense forces.
Vasily Dmitrovich says he's doing his part to help with the war effort. He says he's planting more crops and he's going to try to grow more food to feed Ukrainians who may be in need
in the weeks and months ahead. One of Vladimir Putin's stated objectives for his war on Ukraine was to demilitarize the country. Instead, he has mobilized farmers, grandmothers, and electricians to form a grassroots resistance against the Russian invasion.
And Ivan Watson joins us now. I got to say, Nina, if there is a Nina in every village in Ukraine, the Russians really better watch out. I mean, she was amazing.
Yeah, she actually was in Afghanistan with the Soviet occupation in the 80s and carried a rifle and grenades and was involved in firefights there, she told me. And she's not the only Nina. My team has talked to another grandmother a previous day who said the same exact line. And I think it gets to that line being, if I had Putin in front of me, I'd strangle him with my own hands, which is shocking to hear coming from a babushka, a grandmother here. But I think it gets to that moral indignation that so many Ukrainians share. This line that people repeat again and again: this is our land, this is our country, and Russia is an invading force. And that just drives people crazy, as you could probably understand from almost any other country in the world that was invaded by a foreign army.
Yeah, there's a lot of Ninas here in Lviv who are watching what's going on and preparing as well. Ivan Watson, a great reporter. Appreciate it. A preview coming up of President Biden's NATO summit next week, and President Zelensky's address to Congress tomorrow. We'll have a live report from the White House. Also ahead, New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman and his words of warning about expecting the unexpected here.